right, you can just go anytime. Once they're all in, I mean. Come on, come back here. Come on back. Come on back. All right, come on back, Justin. Keep bunching back here, guys. Hey, hey. Professor Julian. All right.
Okay, so this is the University of Iowa rowing team boathouse for the women's rowing team. It also has the club rowing, what do you call it, rowing team club here. But the main function of the building is for the women's rowing team, which has been without a real home since 1994 when the sport was established. So this was a big event for the university and women's sports in general to get this facility.
Cool.
When we first started the project, we went on a tour of a lot of facilities out in Boston and on the East Coast. We went up to Wisconsin's facility to check out, you know, what other boathouses were like, because they're a pretty unique building type. We were able to learn a lot. One of the unique parts of the building is the rowing tank, which is kind of a treadmill for rowing. And it's here behind us. It's not full of water at the moment, but it would typically have 2 feet of water. And what we found on tours of other facilities is that there aren't any rowing tanks that really get up to a speed where you can practice racing. So they typically have to cut down the oars to make it feel like they're rowing faster, basically. So what we did in this case was worked with the University of Iowa Hydraulics Institute to figure out how to make a tank that actually got up to potentially 13 feet per second,
wow,
which would be top racing speed. And we don't know if we've done it for sure yet, but
testing it, right?
We're close.
But the model demonstrated.
Yeah, and this tank demonstrated at 33% of the motor capacity that it could go over the top speed of Wisconsin's tank. So,
ooh, score.
But we're not competitive in athletics.
So the tank was there was a quarter scale model that we had of that that the Hydraulics Institute built. And we worked through that, figuring that they had all these equations and everything, but when it's a quarter scale model, it's actually half the water speed that you have to work through. So that was pretty complicated. There were the supercritical flow issues and the Froude number.
The Froude number.
Important number. I have no idea what it's about, but.
So that was a fun part of the project. Unique.
It's where water becomes unstable.
Ah.
And I did learn that.
How do you spell it?
F-R-O-U-D, I think.
Froude number. Okay, good. Write it down.
I think that's what it is.
This is actually might be good to have as an idea to look at the chaos part of flow. Wow, that's a good idea. For generating, they have to design a boathouse next.
Good.
So I started talking here, and I didn't introduce myself or Jane, but this is Jane Meyer, Senior Associate Athletic Director for University of Iowa, and I'm Tim Schroeder with Newman Munson Architects.
We just actually met some of your employees who are former ISU grads. Who was it again?
Nick saw you.
Lindsley.
Yeah.
We met him in the Pet Mall. We were just cruising around looking for lunch. So.
There were plenty of choices.
Oh yeah.
It was busy.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Let me just give you a little bit of details about our team. When you're talking about a rowing team, it depends on collegiately. They could have men's and women's rowing. So depending on what you're looking at, we only have women's varsity rowing. It's our second largest team in our athletics department. Largest women's team. We have 85 women. That's usually built up of a novice team and a varsity team. So just to give you a little sense of that, depending on what type of boathouse that you are building, you may have men's varsity and you may have a lightweight. So that will be dependent on what types of shells you build the building for, along with how many you have to hold in your boathouse.
Can you explain a little bit the difference between varsity versus lightweight?
Well, the lightweights is you have to be under a certain weight, and I can't tell you what that is. But it depends on, you still row in the same types of shells, but it's how you distribute them across. And so you have to be under a certain weight. Varsity is where you are recruited because you have rowed at some point in your career. And then a novice team is where literally our coaches go through the admissions line. And if you have an athletic looking body, a few years ago they would have liked mine simply because of my height, and I was an athlete, and because you're able to learn, you have long pulling angles obviously in getting in the shell. But they don't want someone, no offense to you, your size, other than you'd be a great coxswain who's running the shell and directing it and steering it, because my guess is you weigh under 120 pounds and you don't have to admit that, okay? But I'm just saying, so there's a role for everyone in the sport, that we are looking for very small women to be the directors and the leaders and the drivers, and they tell them when to row faster or row slower, and you have to weigh 120 pounds. So that's a constant in the shell. And if you don't weigh 120 pounds, you have to carry sand with you. So you at least minimally weigh 120 pounds.
Wow.
I've never been a coxswain in my entire life. I've never weighed that weight, okay? I've always been bigger. So then that's what you're looking for. So you're looking for novice, which makes up about half of our team, and then we have varsity. Wisconsin actually has a lightweight team. We do not. Because between their men's and women's, they have about 180 athletes of rowing.
Wow.
Okay, so, but again, as Tim said, this is their first home. At their previous place, they didn't have a restroom, they didn't have weights, they didn't have an erg room other than in a separate facility. So this is our first one where the only thing they don't have here is actually their weight, strength and conditioning space, and we do that in another facility. So that's just a little bit of background on the sport that we know so far. Is that a question or an itch? No, no question. Okay. If you have a question about sort of the sport.
When you talk about shells, you mean the boats, right?
That is correct.
And then when we went to the Des Moines Rowing Club, we saw different types of shells. They had the quads with a coxswain and without.
Correct.
And then the two with and without, I think, too, right?
Twos
or four.
Twos are by themselves.
Four. I think the eights had.
The eights always have a coxswain.
Right.
And your fours may or may not. And then you have a two, and then you have a scull, which is a single.
Right.
And you'll see all of those shells here as well.
And then you used the word purlin, I think, too, right? At some point, purlin. No. Arms. You talked about pulling or pulling.
Pulling the pull angle that you have.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay.
And then you have left and right rowers.
Right.
Because in an eight, you'll be pulling from the left or you're pulling from the right. In a scull, you're pulling by yourself, both arms.
Another question I have, I'm just curious, so I'm just asking. In terms of technology, do you have some kind of ergonomic measurements of what bodies would be best suited to doing left and right rowing?
I hope my coach does, but I don't.
You don't, okay. No, I'm just wondering. I mean,
left-handed thing at all?
Yeah.
It is, but it's not. It doesn't have to do with your handedness. It's simply your pull strength that some people tend to have a tendency. Now, on the ergs that you row on, you're pulling straight ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where they do their cardiovascular training. There's actually 3 women here who are working on the ergs. At least they were. Just a little bit ago.
So, but in other words, is there a scientific way to figure out whether you're a better left or right rower that you use?
I'm not aware of it.
All right, okay.
I don't know. I've never been in a shell myself. I've been told that I can get in one as soon as I want to, but I haven't been in one myself.
All right,
other than
all
on
right.
an erg.
Okay, good,
ergometer.
good.
So those people, I mean, when you row, you must really have to work out to work against and compensate for all the potential stress, asymmetrical stress and force that you're putting on your body when you row.
Right. The biggest injuries in rowing are not shoulder injuries, they're back injuries.
Ah.
Because you have to make sure that as you pull, and you'll see on the erg machine, is that it's a pulling with your legs, but then also with your back and your shoulder. Because you have that same sliding motion that you can demonstrate in the tank, you can demonstrate on an erg, and then actually in the shell when you get there. So it's the same pulling motion. And the biggest importance for us when we were talking with Mandy, our coach, is that you have to teach people how to row on moving water. Because you have to learn how to